The quiet customer's night work should be empty, but this store never feels alone. Some receipts print normal totals, yet the counter keeps the wrong smell. The camera shows what it wants, and it skips what I need. I started the overnight shift at a corner store because it sounded like nothing. A shop on the edge of a block, open all night, selling coffee, scratch tickets, and groceries to whoever still had errands after midnight. The manager handed me keys and a routine. Lock the side door at 1, mop at 3, log the cash drops, restock the cooler when it thinned. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The refrigerators breathed cold air in bursts. Outside, most nights the street settled into long pauses between passing cars, and the glass door reflected my own face back at me like I was the only customer who never left. The first sign that something was off wasn't a person. It was the counter. A dull smudge near the card reader kept appearing after certain transactions, like a fingerprint that refused to admit it was one. I wiped it with sanitizer until it faded, and it returned later in the same spot, stubborn. With it came a metallic odor that didn't match any cleaner, any food, any spilled drink. It wasn't strong enough to make me recoil, just strong enough to sit in the back of my throat while I counted bills. The customers connected to it were ordinary in the ways that mattered on paper. They bought water, milk, plain bread, a pack of gum. They paid quickly. They didn't argue about prices. Still, after they left, the air near the register felt used, like a room after someone has been standing too close for too long. After a few nights, I began watching the security monitor more than the aisles. 4 cameras fed into a small screen behind the register, clear. Around 2:13 a.m., the footage started behaving strangely. I would watch a customer enter, cross toward the cooler, and then, in the next moment, see the door swinging shut again with the sidewalk empty. The timestamp jumped ahead in clean, even seconds, no blur, no static, no obvious glitch. When I rewound, the gap stayed there, consistent and neat, like an edited cut. I checked the cable connections. I restarted the system. I told myself the recorder was old, that overnight footage was always choppy, that my attention was sharpening into paranoia because the hours were too quiet. The gaps kept arriving anyway, always around the same time, always when I could swear someone was still in the store. On the 7th night, the pattern tightened into something I could track. The door chimed at 2:13, and a person in a dark hoodie entered without hesitation. They chose a carton of milk, paid with a card, and paused near the back wall where the storage door sat flush with the paint. They stood there just long enough for their shoulders to settle, as if they were listening through the wall. I stayed behind the register, breathing shallowly, waiting for them to leave. And that was when the receipt printer stuttered and produced a second slip with nothing on it except a single line of numbers that matched the storage. Room keypad dot asterisk, the missing seconds day. Camera keeps perfect time until it decides not to. What it loses always happens while I am looking away. The store feels the same, but it does not behave the same. After the night the receipt printed the keypad numbers, I stopped telling myself the equipment was old. I wrote the time down in a notebook and circled it, then circled the circle, then tore the page out and kept it in my pocket like a reminder that I was not imagining things. The storage door stayed closed, the wall stayed plain, and the aisle stayed quiet. Yet I began to notice how often people drifted toward that back corner without buying anything that belonged there. They would pick up simple items, nothing that needed to be checked for age or locked behind glass, and still they lingered, standing in the narrow space between the freezer hum and the soft tick of the clock above the lottery sign. When they left, the door chimed and the street outside looked normal, but the counter kept that same wrong smell, and my hands felt like I had handled coins left too long in rain. I started checking the footage every hour. The gaps were not random. They arrived in small, clean slices, always between the door chime and the cooler aisle, always long enough to fit a person walking, but not long enough to show where they went. The timestamp skipped forward without hesitation, as if the recorder had been told exactly how much to forget. I brought in my own phone and filmed the monitor while the system recorded, and when I compared them later, my video showed the same jump, the same missing stretch, the same tidy absence. The idea that something could edit itself without leaving a scene made my stomach feel hollow, and I began to understand that the problem was not that the camera was failing, but that it was behaving. As instructed, the store itself started to answer in small ways. The mop bucket would be warm in the morning, even when I had filled it with cold water. The trash bags behind the counter grew heavier than their contents should have allowed. Once, I found a faint line of dust along the base of the back wall and had not been there an hour earlier. A narrow drift that looked as though it had been brushed by something moving low and close. I swept it away and told myself it was from the storeroom, but when I checked, the storeroom floor was clean. Customers continued to buy ordinary things, continued to avoid eye contact, continued to pause in that corner as if waiting for a sound I could not hear near the end of the week. A man came in twice in one night, which would not have been strange if he had not paid for the same bottle of water both times. The first time he left it unopened on the counter and walked out. The second time he carried it to the back corner, stood there, and returned without it. The footage showed him entering and leaving, and nothing in between. When I went to look, there was no bottle on the floor, no spill, no trash. Only the faint metallic smell, stronger than before, and the quiet sense that the wall had listened back. I wrote everything down and locked the notebook in my car. And when I came back inside, the printer had already started feeding paper, preparing to tell me something I had not asked for. Asterisk the back wall, nothing on that wall looks like a door, and that feels intentional. People stand there like they are waiting for a sound that never comes. The store keeps its secrets by pretending not to notice by the third week. The back corner had become the center of my nights, even when I tried to ignore it. I learned the rhythm of the place in a way that had nothing to do with sales or cleaning schedules. The refrigerator sighed every 9 minutes. The lottery clock lost 2 seconds every hour and caught them back later. The fluorescent lights dimmed in a pattern that never repeated, and the wall behind the storage door stayed flat and patient, painted the same tired color as the rest of the store, unmarked except for a thin scuff where carts sometimes bumped it. People still drifted there. They did it without looking at me, without pretending to browse, as if their bodies had been told where to stand before their minds arrived. When they left, the air kept a faint trace of that metallic smell, and the counter took longer to feel clean again. No matter how much I wiped it, I decided to test the simplest explanation first, which was that there was nothing special about the wall at all, and that my attention had turned it into a stage. I moved a rack of chips a foot to the left and stacked boxes in front of the corner, not enough to block it, just enough to make standing there inconvenient. It did not change who came in, but it changed how they behaved. They stopped in the aisle instead, hesitated, and then found a way around the boxes to reach the same spot. One woman set down a basket, lifted a box as if it were lighter than it should have been, and slid into the narrow space without meeting my eyes. She bought only a pack of napkins and left them on the counter. The footage showed her entering and leaving. The space between did not exist. That night, I brought a small stepladder from the storeroom and checked the ceiling above the wall. There were no vents, no panels, no seams that looked younger than the rest of the building. I ran my hand along the paint and felt nothing but the faint grit of old layers. When I pressed my ear to it, I could hear the store, which was not comforting because I could also hear something like a second room copying the sounds a half beat late. I told myself it was pipes, or the refrigeration units, or the way empty spaces carry echoes, and I told myself this while the receipt printer began to hum as if warming up, though no one had paid for anything in 20 minutes. It fed out a strip with a single line again, longer this time, numbers and a short word I did not recognize, and then cut itself clean, near closing. A regular I knew, only by the way he folded his change finally spoke. He stood where the boxes narrowed the aisle and said calmly that I should stop moving things that had learned where to stand. He did not threaten me. He did not explain. He bought a loaf of bread, left it on the counter, and walked out. When I checked the footage, he arrived and departed without crossing the space between. I went to lock the storeroom, and for the first time since I started, the back wall was warm to the touch, like it had been holding something in and was not finished doing so. The pattern when things repeat, they stop feeling like accidents. The store does not argue. It only waits. Some routines are older than the shelves that hold them. Once I started writing everything down, the nights began to line up in ways that were difficult to dismiss. The same 3 or 4 customers appeared within the same 20-minute window. They bought the same small set of items. They paused in the same place. The camera forgot the same stretch of time. I stopped changing the layout and let the store return to the shape it seemed to prefer. And in return, it became more predictable, which was somehow worse. The back wall stayed warm long after closing, cooling only toward morning, like something that had been working and finally decided to rest. The wrong smell no longer surprised me, but it did change slightly, as if whatever caused it was being diluted by repetition. I began checking the inventory against the receipts and found small discrepancies that could not be blamed on counting mistakes. Bottles of water vanished without ever being sold. A case of milk emptied itself 1 carton at a time, even when the footage showed no one opening the cooler. Once, a sealed box of napkins appeared on the floor near the back corner with the tape still intact, as if it had been set down from a height that did not belong to the room. I marked the boxes with a pen and watched the marks disappear over the course of a week. Not scraped away, not smudged, just gone. The idea that the store could accept and return objects without leaving a record made my chest feel tight, and I found myself standing behind the register with my hands folded, waiting for the door chime like a signal rather than a sound. The regulars behaved as though they knew the schedule better than I did. One man came in at 2:11 every night and left at 2:14 with a single apple. A woman arrived at 2:16, bought nothing, and still thanked me before leaving. They did not talk to each other. They did not talk to me. They did not hurry. When I tried to greet them, my voice sounded wrong in my own ears, too loud, as if the store preferred quieter exchanges. The camera continued its clean omissions, and my phone continued to agree with it. The recorder was not failing. It was following a rule. Late one morning, when the sun had begun to push pale light through the windows, a delivery driver found me sitting on the stepladder near the back wall, listening. He asked if I was all right and said the building sometimes made noises at night. I asked what kind, and he shrugged and said the kind that made you keep your distance. He signed the slip, left the boxes, and told me he would put them by the corner like always. When he was gone, I noticed that the new boxes were already warm. That night, I tried something small and careful. I placed a strip of painter's tape along the base of the wall, straight and neat, a line that would show if anything crossed it. I told myself it was a test, not a challenge. Around 2:13, the door chimed. The same man with the apple arrived. The camera skipped. The tape was unbroken. The apple was gone. And the storeroom door, which I had locked, was standing open. Asterisk, the routine breaks. Some habits keep places stable, even bad ones. When you interrupt them, the place notices before the people do. The store had been patient, but patience is not the same as tolerance. After the storeroom door was standing open, I stopped pretending I was only observing. I closed it, locked it, and stood there for a full minute with my hand on the handle, waiting to feel it move on its own. It did not. The wall was warmer than it had ever been. Not hot, just unmistakably alive with held heat. And the smell near the register had taken on a sharper edge that made my eyes water if I breathed too deeply. I finished the shift by following the routine as closely as possible, but the routine felt like a script I was reciting in the wrong order. When morning came, I slept poorly and woke up with the sense that I had missed a call that had never been placed. I decided to arrive early that night and change one small thing at a time. I moved the chip rack back to where it had been before, then moved it again, then put it exactly in the place that seemed to calm the flow of people. I replaced the tape on the base of the wall and added another strip higher up, a second line to catch what the first might miss. I put a sealed bottle of water on the floor near the corner and wrote the time on the label. I told myself that if nothing happened, I would accept that the store had its quirks and that I had made them larger than they were. The store did not reward this optimism. At 2:11, the man with the apple came and left. At 2:13, the door chimed again, and a woman I had not seen before entered, bought a pack of napkins, and stood in the narrow space by the wall long enough for her shoulders to relax. The camera skipped. When I looked back, the bottle of water was gone, the tape was unbroken, and the napkins were on the counter. The smell thickened, and the fluorescent lights dimmed as if someone had lowered them a notch without touching a switch. I went to the storeroom and found the door unlocked, though I had checked it less than 5 minutes earlier. Inside, nothing looked disturbed, but the floor felt warmer under my shoes, and the air had the faint, closed-in quality of a room that has just been occupied. The rest of the regulars came and went in their careful window. And then, near 3, the man who had warned me about moving things returned. He did not buy anything. He stood in the aisle and said calmly that I should not be here when the store finishes what it is doing. He did not say what that meant. He did not wait for an answer. When he left, the camera recorded the door opening and closing and nothing in between. I broke the routine on purpose after that. I locked the front door 10 minutes early, turned off the open sign, and stood behind the register with the storeroom keys in my hand. The store grew quieter in a way that made the refrigerators sound distant. The wall held its heat. The receipt printer began to feed paper without being asked, and when I tore the strip free, it listed the same numbers again, and then a time I had not yet reached. The storeroom door clicked once, softly, from the other side. Asterisk. The open time some places do not ends, they only pause them. What they keep is not meant to be counted or named. Morning does not always reset what night has arranged. I did not open the storeroom door when it clicked. I stood behind the register and waited, listening to the way the store held its breath, to the way the refrigerators sounded farther away than they should have, to the way the wall seemed to give back the room's noises a fraction of a second late. The receipt printer stopped on its own. The paper it had already fed lay on the counter like a narrow tongue. I told myself that if nothing else happened before 4, I would unlock the front, let the city back in, and pretend the night had been only a bad habit I had learned too well. The idea felt thin even as I formed it. Minutes passed without the door chiming. The wall stayed warm. I went to check the tape and found both strips exactly as I had placed them, straight and unbroken, and yet the floor near the corner felt as though someone had just stood there and left. I walked to the storeroom and tested the handle. It turned. Inside, the shelves were as neat as ever, but the air was different, heavier, like a room that has been closed for a long time and then opened without letting it breathe. I stood in the doorway and listened, and for a moment I thought I could hear a second version of the store keeping time somewhere beyond the walls, matching my footsteps and then correcting them. The front door chimed at 3:58, earlier than any of the regulars ever arrived. A man I did not recognize came in, bought a bottle of water, and waited by the back wall. He did not look at me. The camera skipped. When the door chimed again, the bottle was on the counter, unopened, and the man was not in the store. The tape was still unbroken. The wall had cooled, just a little like something settling. At 4, I unlocked the front and turned the sign back on. The morning crowd came in the way it always did, with coffee breath and quiet impatience, and the store felt ordinary in the careful, practiced way it had always managed. The smell was faint but present. The inventory was short a case of water. The footage from the night showed clean hours and clean gaps, and the gaps lined up with the times on the strip of paper I had folded into my pocket. I threw the paper away and found it in my locker that afternoon, smooth and clean. Over the next week, the pattern loosened without breaking. Fewer people paused by the wall, but the ones who did stayed longer. The camera missed less, but it still missed. The storeroom door stayed locked, but sometimes it was warm to the touch. I stopped trying to test the place and focused on keeping it running. The regular who had warned me did not come back. The man with the apple came twice and left none. One morning, as I was leaving, I saw a new strip of paint along the base of the back wall. A careful patch that matched the color too well to notice unless you were looking for it. I could not remember doing it. The manager said the building did its own maintenance sometimes. That night, at 2:13, the door chimed, and the camera kept perfect time. The wall was cool. The store felt quiet in a way that was not restful, and I realized I had stopped waiting for proof and started waiting for permission, without knowing who would be the one to grant it.